The Shark Vac Mop. The all-in-one disposable pad that vacuums up debris other pads push around. Then spray mops tough messes. Just vacuum, then spray, and toss. The Shark Vac Mop.
What's so special about the Shark Vac Mop? It just actually spreads liquid and onto the surface, but it just never actually pushes dirt away. In comparison to a regular mop, you would actually witness it would actually sweep away the most of the dirt piled up on. That means you would have never actually vacuumed the floor thoroughly. The residue or remnants would have still remain on the surface, but it would actually be displaced. But this type of a thorough system would have perfectly removed the dirt from the ground, and that way there is no chance any type of a micro residues would have still remain on the floor. There is no chance. And it would actually spray tiny micro drops onto the floor to make it moisturized, and that way the surface grime can be easily cleaned off, and that provides the best choice for house cleaning, keeping your surface neat and tight. It's really easy.
There are cars. Safe for being a new customer, for adding drive wires, and for driving safely. Whatever you drive, start driving down the cost of insurance. Call 1-800-ALL-STATE or a local agent today.
Dove Body.
Allstate is one of the greatest insurance companies in the United States. If you ever drive a car, you own a car, you need to actually know how to actually lower your premiums. But if you really wanted to talk to one of our agents who can provide the best option for your car and your system, then you can actually make a phone call to us to figure out how you can actually drive down the ever-increasing premiums for car insurance while extending the coverage of the insurance. And that way you can actually get the best out of our system. Let's try to watch what's going on. No more. I don't want to do this.
We're done with disposables. Introducing Super Leak-Proof underwear from NYX. The most absorbent period undies ever. They look and feel and machine wash just like regular underwear. Leave that trash behind. Switch to Super Leak-Proof underwear at NYX.com.
Meet their Super NYX undie for anyone who's been having period. If you're on period, you actually always wear disposable napkin, but you always suffer from leakage, right? Forget about this leakage during the nighttime. Because the Super NYX, a comfortable, comfy, malleable NYX, this is as comfortable as your skin. But you know what? No need to have a worry about it. If your undies would be tainted with the blood, you can just actually run it. It's much machine washable. That means you can throw in your tumble machine to wash it. Any washer can actually be okay. But you still actually feel the comfy, softable, cozy texture of it. It's really nice. You know what, just forget about the trash. That wouldn't make you feel so awkward. Because no irritable substance would have been included. This fabric was all natural. So you can never actually feel very much disgustingly itchy. Whenever you actually guard yourself from having blood leakage. So menstruation period would no longer be such a pain in the ass. That's really nice. This is soft and a feathery and comfortable texture, but still, impermeable. That means it would be waterproof and no more blood stain and leakage that might drain and that might taint your bad spread. Forget about it. And even if there is a tiny blood drainage on the surface of your comfortable undies, forget about washing it with the difficulty. You just actually throw it in your washer and run it. There isn't nothing so complicated about it.
24 hours later, Trump undercutting his assurance of a peaceful exit. Tweeting, Biden can only enter the White House as president if he can prove that his ridiculous 80 million votes were not fraudulently or illegally obtained.
during the course of 2020.
But it's Trump who's failed to prove his claims. Today, a federal appeals court denying the Trump campaign's latest effort to overturn Biden's victory in Pennsylvania. Judge Stephanos Bibas, a Trump appointee, writing, "Calling an election unfair does not make it so. Charges require specific allegations and then proof. We have neither here. The campaign's claims have no merit." That ruling brought Trump and his allies courtroom losses and withdrawals to more than 30, with not a single court in any state substantiating Trump's claims the election was rigged. Trump also refusing to commit to attending his successor's inauguration, a tradition upheld by every outgoing president since 1869.
I don't want to say that yet. I mean, I know the answer. I'll be honest, I know the answer, but I just don't want to say it yet.
Trump is committing to campaigning next week in Georgia,
It's very important that we win those races.
where 2 runoff elections will decide the fate of the U.S. Senate. Georgia Republicans are worried Trump's baseless claims about voting
I said, listen, you have a fraudulent system.
and his attacks on the state's Republican Secretary of State
He's an enemy of the people. The Secretary of State.
could depress GOP turnout. Today, Trump doing damage control, tweeting, "The 2020 election was a total scam, but we must get out and help David and Kelly. Otherwise, we are playing right into the hands of some very sick people." Meanwhile, the president spending another day on the golf course, missing in action as the coronavirus pandemic enters its darkest chapter yet.
We are rounding the curve.
Downplaying the virus, focused instead on who gets credit for the vaccines.
Don't let Joe Biden take credit for the vaccines. Because the vaccines were me, and I pushed people harder than they've ever been pushed before. And we got that approved and through. And nobody's ever seen anything like it.
And President-elect Joe Biden's team is now also reacting to that lawsuit in Pennsylvania and that ruling from the Third Circuit Court of Appeals there. This coming from the spokesman for Joe Biden, Mike Gwynn, who says, quote, "This election is over and Donald Trump lost, both in Pennsylvania and nationally. Desperate and embarrassingly meritless lawsuits like this one will continue to fail and will not change the fact that Joe Biden will be sworn in as president on January 20th. 2021. Now, as for the president's legal team, we got a statement from Jenna Ellis, one of the president's lawyers. She says that the campaign plans to take this lawsuit all the way to the Supreme Court. Jeremy Diamond, CNN, the White House.
It's a very interesting news story. I mean, I actually started in the middle of this report. President Donald Trump is still very much obsessed with his desire to subvert the consequences coming from the Joe Biden's victory and President Donald Trump's loss. But today there was another blow that truly shamed President Donald Trump's efforts, because the Third Circuit Court truly sides with Joe Biden by saying that Donald Trump's decision has no merit whatsoever. This, in the Third Circuit Court, Stephanos Bibas was appointed by President Donald Trump. So one might actually say that, oh, he could actually be Donald Trump's loyalist, but he actually puts down the harshest criticism against Donald Trump's effort, saying that just simply saying that the election results were fraud and all the votes that were counted were not substantiated. This type of one-sided claim would gain no traction in the system, because there is no substantiated evidence to back up that kind of argument. It means there is only a circumstantial assertion, which you could never actually gain fructified proofs that can be tradable or exchangeable in the realm of jurisprudence. That's really the reason why his claim gains no merit. There is no understanding whatsoever that could be acceptable within the court system, because no one would ever think this would be reasonable and sufficiently compelling that might demand the court system to give an approval for a recount. No. President Donald Trump again spread this argument that Joe Biden first, before his inauguration, should prove how he in the first place won 80 million ballots. That would actually be a conspiracy theory, as he asserted. But technically, it's Donald Trump who should first bring out the consensual agreement from different sides, because he is a loner. He's a lone wolf in this game who's been claiming that he somehow managed to win this election with no efforts that might be concrete enough to bolster the argument. So today's court decision is nothing but a wet blanket to dampen the already dying down efforts from the President Donald Trump, right? And he also failed to clarify whether he would attend the inauguration ceremony of Joe Biden. That has been tradition ever since 1869. There was no single outgoing president who skipped this event. So he could be very exceptional or not. That depends on him. He says that he already knows the answer, but he's not going to actually reveal anything about it. That's really interesting. He evades this type of immediate question, which could actually be a very defining point of his outgoing presidency. He's been still looking for a chance to have a say in this political game, because in the next week he's been already planning to join the actual Senate runoffs taking place in Georgia. There are massive campaign efforts are happening in the state of Georgia for this Senate runoff, which could definitely have a definitive power to change the fate and destiny of the United States Senate. He actually demonstrated his will to support David and Kelly. Senator David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. Those are really the two candidates from the Republican Party. But technically, conservatives are really worried about Donald Trump's baseless argument. He's been attacking the state's Secretary of State, who's been in charge of the election procedures and the final outcomes. Donald Trump actually depicted this Secretary of State Raffensperger as a monster who's been so harmful and nefarious to the sanctity of a democracy. But that was a completely bogus tell the truth, because this Republican authority is working hard to keep the sanctity of Georgia's election progress and a procedure that had been conducted, and there was technically nothing seriously flawed. But President Donald Trump again made this type of politically tinged arguments, which it could even have a backfire on amongst many of the Republican voters. They would have felt very disgusted to hear this type of a nonsensical argument, so this could actually discourage them from voting for two different Republican candidates. That could be possible. That's what has been right now worried about many of the Georgia conservatives. So no one really knows what type of influence he could exercise in this equation. How many people would it be drawn to this conspiracy theory, or how many people would it be repelled by this emergence of outrageous argument? No one can actually guarantee that. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is really not like the person whose nation is facing a serious pandemic crisis, because he still spends most of the time golfing or tweeting. Again, he's been extra frequently spotted at the golf course situated in Virginia, where he's been spending most of his free time these days. Meanwhile, the nation is just actually steps away from the darkest chapter of the coronavirus history, adding significant amount of deaths to the death toll of COVID-19 every single day, with no exception. But meanwhile, his narrative has been reduced into who gets what type of credit. He's been desperate to withhold the dissemination of COVID-19 vaccine, if that would have favored Joe Biden's credentials. So he's been working really hard to actually see the actual benefits coming from having people vaccinated, as if he is really the developer of the coronavirus vaccines. He's been trying to forbid Joe Biden from being the health authority who somehow muster of one's resources to control the situation with efficiency because of the advent of the COVID-19 vaccines. He's been really worried about Joe Biden would have somehow snatched this chance away from him. He just actually emphasized how much, throughout his presidency, ever since the outbreak of the coronavirus, he has been working really hard to spread the monetary resources to boost the efforts of a coronavirus development and invention. And this is really the final development because of today, the actual core announces very devastating results for Donald Trump. So this is almost like the 40th different deficit and defeat experienced by Donald Trump's campaign efforts. So majority of the states actually rejected the chances for a recount and a retabulation, and no series of courts ever considered the case pending seriously. They almost all of them rejected them, and finally the Third Circuit decision has just arrived to humiliate President Donald Trump's ardent efforts once more. In response to that, Joe Biden's campaign manager, Joe Biden's spokesperson Mike Gewin, said that this is another humiliation and embarrassment experienced by President Donald Trump, and it's time for him to acknowledge that Joe Biden is going to be sworn into the office on January 20th of 2021, so he would actually better wrap up his presidency in a peaceful way by acknowledging his defeat. That was really the argument coming from Joe Biden's side. But again, Donald Trump's the legal advisor and Representative Janet Ellis again talk back to this type of a statement saying that Donald Trump will bring this case to the Supreme Court. His team will not let go of any possible shimmer of a hope to find the very legitimacy of election fraud claims, because there had been a massive effort to steal the majority of votes from President Donald Trump. So this case will stay until it would actually be heard at the land's highest court. That's really the argument. But statistically, this is really humble because there are already 40 different losses and a deficit that had already been experienced throughout the nation. Majority of hotly contested battlegrounds, they actually even refused to give a green light to Donald Trump's recount request. Excuse me. This is another failure of a President Donald Trump's work, because he's been so obsessed with building the castles in the sky as if he was really the winner who carried more than 70 million that had so far been tabulated. But he actually, on the other side, argues that it's Joe Biden who should and who is obliged to prove the legitimacy and the validity of his 80 million votes allegedly earned by him. How can we trust him? He so far uses such a fraudulent and deceitful tactics. That was really the soundbite coming from President Donald Trump. If you believe it, this is all unbelievable. However, I really actually like the Pennsylvania Court of Appeals judge, whose name is Stefan Vivo, who just even clarified a very underlying sentiment that might actually be shared amongst all different judges who so far reviewed his cases, saying that just simply claiming that he won the election and simply arguing for the existence of a possible fraud, that would never justify anything. or that would never gain a ground in the court system unless these type of arguments would be corroborated with concrete evidence that might indicate the possible probability of the frauds or hoax. Donald Trump's argument or his team's assertion would gain no merit because in the absence of this type of efforts, no one would have paid heed to this one-sided unilateral assertion. Because this is not about hearsay or this is not about personal statement, but this is about the consensus. If you ever wanted to draw a consensus among different people, you need to actually put down a compelling or cogent argument built upon the reliable evidence. But that's not happening. Those, this gains no merit. Yeah. But meanwhile, Donald Trump, I don't know, how many times have I said it, meanwhile?